Hi, this is Carrie Canary Quilts, and it's time for the November blocks for the Fat Quarter Shop Piece and Quilt Sampler Quilt Along that I am doing. I bought the paper piece kit that they sold. This is the foundation paper notion set. It's got all the It's So Emma paper piece tablets and rolls that you would need to help put these blocks together in this quilt. If you bought it, then you know what I'm holding. If you didn't buy it, then it's kind of messy, but it's full of all the pads and rolls that you would need. So, and this right here was a list of what's inside that box. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going through these rolls, pads, telling you which ones you need to use for each block. And if you're unfamiliar with them or you're new to paper piecing, I go through how to use these, how to cut them, how to cut the fabrics for them, all that fun stuff. All right, so November, we have got, let's see, we have got 8 hands around blocks. The 8 hands around block, which is this block right here. It's a 4-color block, and I will be showing you which paper pieces you need for that. And then the next one is called Aircraft. It's the 9-inch Aircraft block, and you do 4 of them. And you do 2 blocks in 2 colorways. So I've got this colorway and I've got this colorway. So I'm going to be going through those, like I said, which paper pieces to use and how to use them. So the book you need is Celebrate with Quilts by Lissa Alexander and Susan Aki. This book has, I think 14 different quilts in it. Tons of blocks. And then in each quilt, it tells you which blocks to use and which size blocks. So they have 4 sizes for each block. It's a really cool book. I like using it. And we're doing the piece and quilt, which is on the front here. That's what we're working on here. So you do not need to paper piece to do any of the quilts in here. They just sold the kit so that you can. And I like to paper piece. I like how square it makes everything. You can do several at once. So that's why I like to do it. And I want to help anybody who wants to try to use these paper pieces. So that's what we're doing today. We're going over those 2 blocks. It's this block right here and these 4 blocks right here. As you can see, I do have my quilt almost all put together. So I have it sideways. This is actually the bottom right corner of the quilt. I put it sideways so that you could see my blocks. But after December, we'll be able to put the entire center of the quilt together. And then January, we're doing half square triangles. So let me know if you're doing the half square triangles, because there's 140 of them. I am, and I'm going to show you how to do it. Anyway, let's stick in November. Let me take you down to my desk. We'll get started on these blocks. But if you're new here, hit the subscribe button, notification bell. You get notified of Piece and Quilt and all the other fun stuff we got going on here. So let's get started. First block we're working on for November is the 12-inch 8 hands around block. This is what it's going to look like. There's actually 4 colors and a background color. And here's the colors I'm using: yellow, green, blue, lavender, and the background is white. And all of this block will be put together with the It's So Emma paper piecing pieces, except for we need to cut our center block right there, the B piece. So let's go through what we need for this block. And what we need is these outside corners. The blue and pink that you see here are going to be the 3-inch finished half square triangle paper pieces. 3-inch finished. That always gets me confused as which one of the half square triangles you need. Then there's some little flying geese right here. The base is blue, the corners are green. That's going to be the 1.5 by 3-inch flying goose pad. And then out here we have the blue and white flying geese. Base is blue, base is white, corners are blue. And for those, we need 3 by 6-inch flying geese pads. So these are what we need to put this block together. The 3-inch finished half square triangles. 1.5 by 3 flying geese and 3 by 6 flying geese. All right, I put my colors away. I've got my pieces out. So here's that center piece we need to cut individually. I'm going to put that up there. The 3-inch half square triangle papers, we need 4 half square triangles, so we just need 1 row. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 4 half square triangles in there. I actually wrote for my colors, because my colors are different than theirs, that I need green and blue fabrics, which I'm going to show you that in a minute. For the small half square triangles, we need 4, so I took out 2 pieces of the paper. So right there we have 4 flying geese. That's what we need for this. The pad tells you how big to make the background piece, this piece, which is the number 1. And I again wrote on here blue and yellow. So what I did, I just went over to my fabric and I just cut a piece of fabric as big as my paper. You can read the directions. It'll tell you exactly how to cut this piece back here, but I just cut it as big as the paper. And then for our corners, it tells you that you're going to need, for each pad of paper, you're going to need 2 squares that you cut on the diagonal. Since I have 2 pieces of paper, I need to double that. So I cut 4 squares, and I've already got these cut, and then I need to cut it on the diagonal. So there's my 4 squares. All right, there's my 4 squares cut on the diagonal, so I now have 8 triangles to use in this. So there we go. 2 pieces of paper, 2 background cuts, and then you need the 8 triangles for that. It's going to be exactly the same for our big ones. I need 2 pieces of paper to make 4 flying geese. I wrote, I need white as the base and blue, which is basically the same as theirs. I didn't plan that. That's just kind of how it happened. And again, I went over to my white. I personally cut the size of my paper. And I have 2 pieces here. And then it tells you what size to cut your squares. 2 squares per piece of paper. I have 2 pieces of paper. That's 4 squares. So I've already cut 3 of them. I'm going to cut this one. And so now I have my 8 triangles that I need for these flying geese. All right. There's my flying geese. Those are ready to go. For my green and blue half square triangles, I'm going to grab my green and blue colors, and what I do is I just lay my piece of paper down and cut around it, and there happens to be a nice piece left here on my blue, and I'm just cutting it bigger than my piece of paper. So there's my blue piece. Now I'm going to take my green and I'm going to lay my blue on top of it and cut basically the same size. Put that away. All right, so there's my green and my blue pieces for my half square triangles. All right, so let's start putting all these pieces together. We've got, a nice little smattering of these It's So Emma paper pieces here to look at. Let's get started with the half square triangles. We need to put our fabrics right sides together. So I need to flip one of these fabrics. So there we go. Fabrics are right sides together. I am going to pin it in place so it stays in place like that. I'm going to set my machine at a lower stitch. My default is 2.2. I'm going to set it to 1.6. And then remember, dashed line is where we sew. solid cut dash sew. And it does tell you that right here on the paper. Cut on solid lines and tear paper away. So, look out. You are not helping us. All right. So I'm going to go over to my machine and I'm going to sew in the direction of the arrows on my dashed lines. I have sewn it. It is hard to see. I used white thread, but I've sewn it on my dashed lines. So now what we can do is, I want it bigger, is now we can cut on the solid lines. And I cut my piece of paper on the solid line. So I'm just cutting on the edge of my paper. Now we can cut on these solid lines on the edge. We can cut up the middle. I line it up on the middle line, plus I line up a line down here to make sure I'm square. And then we can go right up the middle on that solid line. And we have my cat square triangles for this block. So now we are going to sew, or now we can go and iron these over and we'll have our half square triangles for our block. And I have a cat here, so he's making it an issue. But there's my half square triangle for my corners. I've ironed my half square triangles and that's what they look like. I will probably pull the papers off later. Okay, I'm going to set those aside. We can get started on both of our flying geese at the same time. So it's obvious which triangles go to which one, so I'm going to set those up there. So what you need to do is you need to put your paper on the back of your fabrics. So this is the back of my fabric, and the back of my paper is on the back of my fabric. So I can see the top of my paper, and if I flip it over, I will see the top of my fabric. And I'm going to do that for all 4 of my flying geese. My pieces are pinned and ready to go. My paper is pinned onto the back of my fabric. So on all of these, I'm going to do all of these at the same time. I'm going to trim for the number 2. So I'm going to fold my paper back on the number 2 line and trim my blue. And I'm going to turn it over and do the same thing. All right, so I have both of my number 2s trimmed up and ready to go, and I'm going to finish that out on the rest of these. I have all my pieces trimmed for number 2, so what I need to do is for my small one, I need to take the small triangles, and I am going to, there's my edge of my block. So I'm going to line my point up with the edge of my block. And I'm going to get that sewn on, and then I'm going to come back and grab this one, do the same thing, and I'm going to get both of these sewn on at the same time, and I'm going to repeat for all 4 pieces. And this one is no different just because it's small, or just because it's bigger. Here's the edge of my flying goose. Take this, line it up, and sew it on, and then we're going to iron towards our corners. When you go over to your machine, you're going to want to sew on the line between 1 and 2, and I would lock stitch at that point. All right, I've got my corners sewn on, and now I just want to iron towards the corner. I've already done these 2. And then we can trim for our other corners. All right, now on all 4 of these pieces, we can come over here to the number 3, hold on the line, and we can trim for the number 3 piece. And I'm going to do that for all 4 of my flying geese. Didn't get them all trimmed up. I've got my pieces trimmed up for my 3rd piece. Now we can do exactly the same thing. We're going to center our triangle. There's my edge of my block. I'm going to line up my corner with that. And I'm going to get all my 3 pieces sewn on along the line between 1 and 3. It doesn't matter the size of your block. It's going to be exactly the same. And then we can get our flying geese trimmed up. All right, I've got my pieces sewn together. Kind of looks like a square and a square right now, but if we turn it over, we need to now trim on these outside solid lines. And it even says right here, trim on this line, trim on this line. So I'm going to trim on the outside first. And then I'll trim the inside. Then we've got ourselves some perfectly rectangular flying geese. I have made so many flying geese in my life, and if I don't paper piece, which I still don't paper piece sometimes, I don't get perfectly rectangular pieces. The corners can get a little wonky. So there you go. Trimmed on the solid lines, and we've got our flying geese. I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of these, and then I think we'll be ready to assemble the block. There's all my pieces made. I did forget to cut these out. I had to go back and cut these corners out, but basically we're going to put the center star in and then build this thing out in rows. At least I hope I helped you with which half square triangles you need and which flying geese you need if you have the paper piecing kit from Fat Quarter Shop. And there we go. There's my 8 hands around block. That's what the block is called. I showed you which pieces we need to use in this. So 3x6 flying geese, 1.5x3 flying geese, and the 3-inch finished half square triangles. And turned out nice and square. That's what I like about paper piecing. Our next block is aircraft block, and we're going to do 4 9-inch blocks. Now 2 blocks will be one color scheme and 2 blocks will be another color scheme. What we will need for this block is a 2 1/4 finished half square triangle, and that's for these 3 dark pieces you see right here. This looks like a half square triangle, but it is not. Basically what we're going to do is put 2 squares together, sew from corner to corner, and then cut a 1/4 inch. So the only paper pieces we're going to need for this is our 2 1/4 finished half square triangles. Okay, let's take a look at the block so we can have our bearings on how this block is going to look. You can see there's 4 of them right here, and the two kitty corner blocks are one color scheme, and the 2 here are another color scheme. So you can see that where it has a light corner here, then it has medium, and then light, and then dark, medium, and light. So that's kind of how we have to set it up. But the nice thing is, for paper piecing, all of these small half square triangles are all the same color. So that makes it easy. So let's go back and let's take a look at my cuts. Let's talk about this block. I feel like I got a lot going on here since there's 4 blocks with 2 color schemes. All right, let's address this center block. I cut 4 squares of my background and then 2 each of my dark and my light color right here. So what we'll do to get this block is, it's not a half square triangle. We'll put right sides together, and then we will sew on the diagonal and then trim 1/4 inch from that to get our corner. So that's our corner pieces for 4 blocks. Then we need these large triangles, which will be the medium and light colors. We have 4 blocks, so we're going to need 12. And for 2 color schemes, that means we'll need 6 of each color. So I cut 3 squares in my medium and my light, and then you cut those on the diagonal to get your triangle. So all of these right here will be cut on the diagonal, 3 of each color. So those are those triangles. Then here's our half square triangle, but next to it are 2 other triangles. So for all 4 blocks, you need to cut 12 squares of your background and then cut those squares on the diagonal. I have not cut these yet. All of these will have to be cut on the diagonal to get all of your triangles for this block. And that's before we get to the paper piecing. And remember, the paper piecing are these 3 half square triangles in here. So for the paper piecing, we need our 2 1/4 inch finished triangles on a roll. We need 12 of these for 4 blocks. So each row yields 4 half square triangle blocks. So I have 3 rows. I need my dark and my light for these half square triangles. And what I do is I just lay my, that's going to be perfect. I lay my paper on my fabric, and then I just cut it so I have enough fabric around the outside edges. So what I'm going to do now is take this fabric, lay it on my dark. Let's see where it fits. Looks like it fits really nicely right here. And I'm going to cut it out at the same size. Look out. All right, so that's for the half square triangles. So we want to put right sides together of the fabrics. Lay our paper. Look out, bud. Look out. Lay our paper so that there's fabric around all the edges. Look out. So there's fabric on all the edges, around all the edges. And then I'm going to pin, I think I'll pin up here and down here. Set your machine at a shorter stitch length, which helps you be able to perforate the paper once we start ripping it off. So with the shorter stitch length, we'll go over to our machine and we're going to sew on all these dashed lines following the arrows. Dashed lines only is where you're sewing, and follow the arrows. So I'm going to get that done, and then we can trim it up and get half square triangles out of it. There's my paper piece. This is what it looks like on the back. I have sewn on the dashed lines following the arrows. So now we can trim on our solid lines, and I like to trim the outside first. That way we don't have to trim all the outsides every time we cut the blocks out. So I like to do that. All right, at this point you can trim however you want to, but I usually try to do the longest seams first, which would be the center seam. And then I can start cutting my squares out. We can cut up that diagonal. And there's our half square triangle. So I'm going to finish getting all these cut out, and I'm going to get them ironed, and I'm going to get the tail snipped off. I've done this is my inner corner where I put my 2 pieces together, and then I sewed from the corner to the corner. So it's not really a half square triangle like we're used to showing, but I'm going to put my ruler down and trim 1/4 of an inch. So we're going to discard this fabric here, and then this is what our corner will look like. It looks like a half square triangle, but it'll be the correct size. Here's my half square triangles trimmed up, and before we can do anything else, we need to make this unit, and that's going to get paired up with all these these triangles that we made earlier. So this is how it's going to get laid out. Our white triangles are going to go onto the dark edge of our half square triangle, and then we'll be ready to assemble the block. I got all these units assembled here, and then so we have I have 6 of these orange colors and 6 of these light brown colors. And I've laid my 2 sets of blocks out. So this is what 2 of my blocks will look like when I put it together, and this is what the other 2 will look like. So let me get these assembled. All right, there we go. There's my 2 sets of blocks that are different colorways. So the way these are going to get laid out is like this. At least that's how they're going to look in the block. Oh, look at that. That is cool. I like that. That looks really cool. Looks even better than I thought it would look. All right, there we go. That is the second block called Aircraft for Piece and Quilt for November. It was a little more involved. We did only use paper piece for these half square triangles right here. And that was the 2 1/4 inch finished. So there you go. I hope I helped with these blocks and all the paper pieces we need for them. Here's the first block I did, and let me know how it's going for you. I really like paper piecing. I like using the It's So Emma. I'm going to have a lot of these left over, so I'm going to have to figure out something to do with these. I like how square it makes my blocks, and I like paper piecing anyway. So there you go. Hit the subscribe button, notification bell, and you'll get notified of Piece and Quilt and all the other fun stuff we got going on here, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!